The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, an unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Treman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Treman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. I mean, this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just, but there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal. And thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops, hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration or protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the pocket constitution from the ACLU. Right? So that's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards, and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, you know, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who came just dropping by, you know. It was really nice, who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, you know, what I'm asking here, what I'm, you know, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it, and it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, oh, gee, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV, 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, wow, there is so much going on. The Senate Republicans are conspiring right now, and I think that that's a legitimate use of that word because they're doing it in secret, in the dark, not letting anybody know what they're doing, to put together legislation that will do away with the 3.9% tax on capital gains that is largely only paid by billionaires. That tax on capital gains, so that their top tax rate is not 20%, but is 23.9%. That 3.9% tax, the billionaires are very upset about. I mean, we're talking $600 billion over a decade. That's the money that's used by the federal government to pay for your Obamacare subsidy if you're on a health care program, and for your Medicaid, for the federal support for states for expanding Medicaid. And the billionaires are really upset that they're having to pay for everybody's health care. And the Republicans are going to do something about this because the Republican Party is just there for the billionaires. But they know that if they do it in public, if anybody knows about it, now keep in mind, Obamacare was negotiated over the course of a year. There were, many committees involved. There were Republican amendments. There was, it was, the Republicans love to say, oh, it was crammed through. No, it took a year. And it was not in private. It was not in secret. This is in private and in secret. Why? Because it's a $600 billion tax break for billionaires, period. It's not a health care bill. And in order to give those billionaires that tax break, they have to take health care away from 23 million Americans, which may be you. Now, the Democrats in the Senate can slow this thing down by a week or two by refusing to offer consent. In other words, refusing to allow it to proceed to a vote. And then the Republicans are going to have to, that gums up the works for a week or two, and then the Republicans have to basically override their refusal to provide consent and do it themselves, and then the Republicans can vote on the bill and send it off to the House. That will either match it or fix it, or, where this thing is going to go, who knows. But the bottom line is Donald Trump wants this desperately. His billionaire friends, Betsy DeVos and his cabinet, billionaire, Wilbur Ross and his cabinet, a billionaire. I mean, his billionaire friends are really upset. I mean, wouldn't you be if you were a billionaire and every working person in the country could pay as much as 39% in income taxes? You only have to pay 20% because you're a billionaire, right? And some first African-American president in the history of the United States comes along and says, oh, you billionaires, you're going to have to pay for the health care of everybody else in the country because you're not paying your fair share of taxes. Well, the billionaires are like, well, that's just wrong. And in fact, the Republicans have gone so far with this that they're reporting in The Hill, and Casey Hunt over at NBC was the first to report this, that Mitch McConnell has organized it so that the Senate Rules Committee just changed the rules and reporters can no longer stop senators in the hall and interview them. There is to be no discussion of this, right? This is an absolute fascistic crackdown. This is the only way Mitch McConnell can get things done. I mean, this is mind-boggling. Meanwhile, this is a story. This is Nina Burleigh, B-U-R-L-E-I-G-H, maybe it's Burleigh, writing for Newsweek. The headline is Trump-era political violence deterring Democratic candidates. Seriously. Michael Treman, manager of a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, a Republican by the name of Richard David. You're going to run against the Republican, you're going to run as a Democrat, right? So Treman announced that he was going to do his social duty, his political, his American duty. I'm going to run for political office. We should celebrate that, right? Well, let me just share this story with you. 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing, quote, heinous attempts to scare me off. That same day, as Treman, this from the Newsweek article, as Treman returned home after picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a sitter, an unidentified man in a truck yelled, liberal scumbag, and threw a full soda container that hit Treman in the back while he was protecting his infant. So that's in New York. Then let's go to Iowa. Steve King, one of the wackiest right-wing Republicans out there, the guy who said that, Mexican immigrants have cantaloupe thighs from smuggling bales of marijuana across the border, blah-de-blah-de-blah. I mean, a very offensive guy. Very high-profile Tea Party guy. Kim Weaver, last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, quote, beginning during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats is just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Well, it was for Michael Treman, too. He, back to the article, Treman, 33, did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. He told local media that if he didn't have a wife and kids, he might have chased down the assailant, but because of his children, there was too much fear. The only reasonable thing to do, he said, is to withdraw. There was something to withdraw. There was something more visceral about this incident. It had nothing to do with anything substantive. It had to do with my experience with a political party. That would be the Republican political party. The intimidation has left Democrats without a candidate. So Broome County Democratic Chairman Tim Griffin this weekend announced that the party will place a placeholder name because it still doesn't have a candidate. Last month, Fox News filmed Montana Congressman Greg Gianforte assaulting a reporter in an unprovoked attack. The next day, as journalists covered the election, a Montana voter threatened a crew from CNN, saying, you're lucky someone doesn't pop one of you. Gianforte, of course, pled guilty to assault. The author of this piece in Newsweek says, the new era of political thuggery dates to raucous Trump campaign rallies last summer when the candidate, that would be Trump, urged supporters to, quote, lock up his opponent, Hillary Clinton, and promised to pay the legal fees of those who often scuffled with protesters and berated journalists. Alex Jones threatened on the air to beat Democratic Representative Adam Schiff and told the California congressman to fill your hand, a reference to taking up a pistol. This, by the way, according to an attorney with expertise in the federal law, told Newsweek at the time that the threats appeared to break federal law, U.S. Code Title 18, Section 115, which makes it illegal to threaten to assault a U.S. official and provides a penalty of up to 6 years in prison. Alex Jones was never charged with a crime. Instead, Megyn Kelly is going to make him famous, putting him on NBC. Much to the chagrin of the Sandy Hook families who are, hurt and offended by Alex Jones, arguing that the Sandy Hook massacre was just a fake total, didn't happen. This was made up, false flag operation, and it was done to further the notion of gun control. I mean, this is just amazing. And then I had a debate yesterday on the top income tax where I'm saying, the top income tax needs to be back above 50% at least, and maybe as high as 74 to 90%, because it worked really well at those levels. And you see those levels in much of the rest of the developed world. So now this article by Paul Buchheit over at Common Dreams. Paul writes some of the best stuff. He said, last year it was 8 men, then down to 6, now almost 5. As of June 8th, 2017, the world's richest 5 men own over $400 billion in wealth. Thus, on average, each man owns nearly as much as 750 million people. The headline, now just 5 men own almost as much wealth as half the world's population. Most of the super rich are Americans, he says. In 2016 alone, just last year, the richest 1% effectively shifted nearly $4 trillion in wealth away from the rest of the nation, that would be you and me, to themselves. With nearly half of the wealth transfer, $1.9 trillion, coming from the nation's poorest 90%, the middle and lower classes. That's an average of around $17,000 in housing and savings per lower to middle class household lost to the super rich. Now, he says the rationale for this is we're a meritocracy. These billionaires who are getting richer and richer and richer are billionaires because they're just so brilliant. Right. Well, Paul Buchheit writes, in 1975, at the age of 20, Bill Gates founded Microsoft with high school buddy Paul Allen. At the same time, Gary Kindle's CP/M operating system was the industry standard. Even Gates' company used it. But Kildall was an innovator, not a businessman. And when IBM came calling for an operating system for the new IBM PC, his delays drove the big mainframe company to Bill Gates. Even though the newly established Microsoft company couldn't fill IBM's needs, Gates and Allen saw an opportunity, so they hurriedly bought the rights to another local company's operating system, which was based on Kildall's CP/M system. Kildall wanted to sue, but intellectual property law for software had not been yet established. Kildall was the maker who got taken. So Bill Gates took from others to become the richest man in the world, writes Paul Buchheit, and now because of his great wealth and the meritocracy myth, many people look to Bill Gates for solutions in vital aids of human needs, such as education and global food production. Like on education, he's promoted galvanic skin response monitors to measure the biological reactions of students and the videotaping of teachers to evaluate their performances. About schools, he said, Bill Gates said, quote, the best results have come in cities where the mayor is in charge of the school system, so you have one executive and the school board isn't as powerful. Right. American billionaires, Paul Buchheit writes in summary, all made their money because of the research and innovation and infrastructure that make up the foundation of our modern technologies. They have taken credit, along with their massive fortunes, for successes that derive from society rather than from a few individuals. It should not be any one person's decision about the proper use of that wealth. Instead, a significant portion of annual national wealth gains should be promised to education, housing, health research, and infrastructure. That's what Americans and their parents and grandparents have earned after a half century of hard work and productivity. And by the way, why won't the media report about Democrats who are being threatened out of running for political office?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, one little story in Newsweek. If a Republican was being threatened and had to withdraw from running for political office, Fox would be on it 24/7, and so would the rest of the corporate media. And welcome back. Law in Jamaica, New York. Hey, Law, what's on your mind today? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Shadow banking.
Okay.
I've been on this for quite some time, Tom, and to be frankly honest, when the shadow banking industry was exposed, when our friend Bernie Madoff back in 2008, there were certain things through the years that we have to be able to put our finger on, and one of them is securities. Bernard L. Madoff Securities. This gentleman had his finger on the pulse of basically the whole shadow banking industry. And what has happened is, without our knowledge, we are part of these capital markets. And I say that to mean that every time you see what appears to be your name in all caps, there is a routing number, an account number attached to it. I've been doing this now for a while as far as my own due diligence, and I followed the instructions of Congressman Alan Grayson, who was grilling the banking industry about the disappearance of $9 trillion in 9 months. And
Yeah, Law, you had me until you got to the all caps part. This is a conspiracy theory that has been widely spread across the internet, mostly in far-right circles, and it's BS. The shadow banking is huge, and it's a problem. I mean, there's somewhere between 300 and 800 trillion dollars in securities out there, in mostly basically bets. The bets and bets against bets and bets against bets and derivatives they're referred to as. And that's what took, in large part, that's what took down the entire banking system back in 2008. And frankly, I think it's going to happen again. But that's got nothing to do with whether your name is in all caps and whether you're entitled to $1 million and whether the United States is a corporation and whether you have a piece of it or not and whether you need to pay taxes or not. All that stuff is weird conspiracy theory stuff coming out of the most bizarre fringes of the right-wing law.
Tom?
Yes, sir.
I respect you a great deal. But if I could tell you I had proof that existed, and I could very easily explain to you how they did it, would you entertain the thought?
Oh, you've got 50 seconds until the break is over.
Okey doke. Every time you see your name in that all caps market, that's the capital markets. If you take
How do you know?
several numbers off of stuff that you use for identification purposes.
Wait a minute. How do you know this?
Through the oldest banking organization in the U.S., the Clearinghouse.
How do you know this?
Because I've done it. I've taken the numbers off of certain documents, certifications, and registrations in my possession, and every last one of them lead to that shadow banking outfit that we've been discussing. They rolled up their magic carpet and went into hiding back in 2008. But basically, every time you see that name, there's a number attached to them with accounts, both here and abroad.
Yeah. There aren't, Law. You are falling for something that's a variation on the Nigerian scam. Send us a little bit of money and we will be able to get you a lot of money because, my brother is a prince and he owns the oil fields and things like that. Law, be very, very, very careful and don't send anybody money and don't send anybody personal information based on this. Thanks a lot for calling.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. It's amazing, everything that is going on, and I'm not I'm just getting started here. I am just getting started. Chuck Schumer tweeting out. Chuck Schumer, yesterday we saw this mind-boggling, butt-kissing spectacle where the cabinet, Trump's cabinet officers, all sat around and told him how wonderful he was. Chuck Schumer got together with his staff and made a kind of a little parody clip based on it. And what was it, NBC, Chris? Yeah, NBC kind of put the two of them together and tossed it up on YouTube. So let me just share this with you real quickly. It's fascinating. Here's this.
They got the exact right message, and it's being responded. The response is fabulous around the country.
Session.
Deeply honored, and I want to thank you for keeping your commitment to the American workers.
My hat's off to you for taking that
Very.
stand and for sending a clear message around the world.
It's a privilege to serve.
That's
I can't thank you enough for
Tom Price.
the privilege that you've given me and the leadership that you've shown.
So I'm thrilled to have a chance
Wilbur
to
Ross.
help you live up to your campaign promises.
Thank you for
Lynn
getting
Chow.
this country moving.
Optimism from small businesses is higher than it's been in about 16 years.
We thank you for the opportunity and the blessing that you've given us to serve your agenda.
We're making tremendous progress.
We thank
I
you
want to
for the
congratulate
blessing.
you on the men and women you've placed around this table, the holistic team of working
Everybody
for America
except General
is
Maddox was
making
just totally
results
kissing
in
his
each
butt.
and every area.
Right? So then shortly afterwards, Chuck Schumer gets together with his staff.
I want to thank everybody for coming. I just thought we'd go around the room. Lucy, how'd we do on the Sunday show yesterday?
Your tone was perfect. You were right on message.
Michelle, how'd my hair look coming out of the gym this morning?
You have great hair. Nobody has better hair than
Before we
you.
go any further, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity and blessing to serve your agenda.
That's great.
And they all break up laughing. But after that, Chuck Schumer tweets that out, and then he says, he tweets, Republicans don't want the American people to know that their plan has massive cuts to Medicare, or that their plan would make costs go up and leave millions without health care, or that their plan will make people pay more for less coverage just so the rich get a tax break. If they were proud of this plan, they wouldn't hide anything. They'd crow all about it. What exactly are they trying to cover up? This is it. This is not a drill. So the Democratic Party is engaged, the Senate Democrats are engaged in a debate right now about whether they should hold this thing up for a week or two with procedural efforts. I would encourage you to call your senators. You have two of them, unless you live here in the District of Columbia, at 202-225-3121. Call your two senators, and if they are Democrats, ask them to do everything in their power to stop this Republican bill, or just even to slow it down. We'll be back with your calls right now.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And more of the news of the day. There's still a lot more going on, and plus you got Jeff Sessions testifying this happening. It's going to get wild. Stick with me. And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, An unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Truman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, "During my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern." Truman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. I mean, this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just, but there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal, and thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops. Hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration or protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the pocket constitution from the ACLU. Right? That's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards, and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, you know, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who came just dropping by, you know. It was really nice, who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, you know, what I'm asking here, what I'm, you know, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it, and it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, oh, gee, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV. 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I wanted to point your attention to this is sort of in the well, I'll give you an up and a down. Okay, this is sort of in the positive vein. Okay, in the positive vein, Carl Richards has a piece in the New York Times. It was originally published on March 29th, and it's making a revival right now on their most forwarded list. It's titled, "Sometimes Spending Brings a Bigger Return Than Saving." And basically, it's a pitch back in 1983 to 86. Louise and I started and owned and ran a travel agency in Georgia, in Atlanta. We lived in the Georgia 6th District, where John Ossoff is running against Karen Handel right now. We lived there for 13 years, in fact. And it punctuated right in the middle by a year that we spent in Germany. And while we were running this travel agency, I did consulting and training for a number of travel companies, including American Express and a number of the cruise lines, some of the American Airlines, a couple of the airlines, where I just basically go in and train people. It was mostly training in marketing and communications, which were the fields that were my specialty. I mean, coming out of having owned ad agencies. And having trained people in advertising for years, advertising, marketing, communications. And my sales pitch about travel was always that pretty much regardless of what it costs, it's a good investment because you have memories for the rest of your life. I've been all around the world a half a dozen times, I mean, literally. And I'm so grateful for that. It's like, and Louise and I have wiped out our savings at least 3 times in our lives, completely, and started all over again from scratch. Again, it was a different time in America. This was before Reaganomics had really sunk in, and it was possible to do those kind of things, and new industries were not completely monopolized like they are now. But Carl Richards writes this piece. He says, life experiences give you an incalculable return on investment every single time. So why is it so hard for us to spend money on them? And he gives the example of going off on a kayaking trip, a 3-day, long weekend. And when he added up all the costs, the resort, the kayaks, the this, the that, the other thing, it was like over $1,000, $1,200. And he's like, holy cow, $1,200. If I, invested this, it would be $4,300 at 7% over the next 20 years. I mean, why would I? But he went ahead and spent the $1,200. He says, the first thing that I experienced when I was out there in the kayak in the first day was, wow, this is really good money. Money well spent. Because I've now got an experience to share, to carry for the rest of my life. I would add, by the way, that those experiences actually enhance resilience. They're emotionally and intellectually refreshing and renewing. So anyhow, just something to share with you. But that, and then the other one that I wanted to share, this is from the Washington Post, and it's from May 14th, actually, by Valerie Strauss. It's from about a month ago. But the story is just mind-boggling. I mean, it's a timeless story. During a budget debate in the state Senate, this is in North Carolina, started Thursday, went into the early hours of Friday, Republicans became annoyed at Democrats, who Republicans thought were unnecessarily offering amendments and prolonging the session. Right? This is, so the Democrats had offered 5 amendments pushing funding priorities, each of which was voted down by the Republicans who control the North Carolina Senate. At about 1 a.m. Friday, the Republicans halted the proceedings and went into private talks, as Republicans are wont to do. At about 3 a.m., they returned, and a Republican senator introduced an amendment of his own. This amendment proposed $1 million in new funding to fight North Carolina's opiate epidemic, which has been called the most severe public health issue in the state. You'd think that everybody would like that, but here's the twist. The money to fund new pilot programs for this cause had to come from somewhere. In other words, the Republicans are not going to raise taxes on rich people to make this work. So Republicans decided to take it out of the education programs exclusively in the districts that were represented by Democrats. The News and Observer, the newspaper in North Carolina, said a rural district in northeastern North Carolina took the biggest hit from the amendment, with $316,000 cut from 2 early college high schools, and the state banned from financially supporting a math, science, and technology program that has helped many African Americans and low-income families. The amendment stripped 7 counties, each one represented by Democrats, from a program that financially supports teacher assistants working on a college degree. The amendment was passed shortly after 3 a.m., where they're all, it just, I mean, these guys, they play hardball. They play nasty, nasty, nasty hardball. And the Democrats are sitting around going, well, the Republicans in the Senate are, they're not even letting reporters talk to senators in the hallway, and they're in secret putting together this health care bill. Should we stop them? Should we slow them down? I mean, we probably can't stop them, but should we slow them down? Well, I don't know. It might be kind of politically risky to take on the Republicans. Nonsense. Take them on. Call your senators, 202-225-3121, and tell your senators, if they're Democrats, to stop the Republicans. And if your senators are Republicans, call them up and say, what are you trying to do with my health care? I like my Obamacare, or I would like it to work. Stop sabotaging it. Anyhow, Dion in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, Dion, what's on your mind today?
Yes, Thom. I heard that they are trying to remove the Dodd-Frank Act, or they already did.
Yeah, the House.
So what happens?
The House voted for a very draconian bill that would essentially repeal most of Dodd-Frank and would cripple the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that has, recovered millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars for tens of millions of Americans. Hundreds of millions of dollars for tens of millions of Americans. And it's got to go to the Senate. But yeah, that's what's going on.
How is that going to help the bankers, and how is that going to hurt the middle class if there's a financial meltdown? And if a financial meltdown does occur, I think that Trump will he will blame Obama because he already blamed him for the financial burden from before. So what do you think, what would be the outcome for the bankers in the middle class? And then my other question was, there was anti-Sharia protests over the weekend.
Right.
And do you think that can provoke a Reichstag fire and possibly lose civil liberties if there was an attack?
Oh, I absolutely think Donald Trump is sitting around waiting for an event that he can use to declare a national state of emergency. And, it's just, there's no doubt in my mind that is how these guys think. With regard to Dodd-Frank, these provisions that were put back into law, basically, Glass-Steagall was repealed in either 99 or 2000. And so it took basically 8, maybe 9 years from the beginning of the deregulation until the crash for the banksters to steal about $14 trillion. That's the amount that the Fed had to put into the banks. For the banksters to steal $14 trillion and buy their mansions all over the world and, put their money in Swiss bank accounts and whatnot, and then we had to make them whole. And of course, no banksters went to jail as a result of this because, they were making huge political contributions. And, I would think that if the Republicans are successful in repealing these, we still don't have Glass-Steagall. We still don't have separation between commercial and investment banking. And we still have a shadow banking system that, in the derivatives market that is on hundreds of trillions of dollars, just waiting to blow up the system again. But what we know is that typically it takes a few years from the deregulation to the crash. For example, when Reagan deregulated the S&Ls in, as I recall, 1983, it took 3 years, I think, I could be wrong on this, might have been 4 years to 86 or 87, for the S&Ls to collapse. For the thieves to make off with the money, basically. George W. Bush's brother, Neil Bush, was one of them, the whole Silverado savings and loan thing in Colorado. Made off with $1 million, as I recall. So it takes a few years. You know, once you deregulate an industry, it takes a few years for the parasites and predators in that industry to just, you know, suck it dry, basically. And so, you know, if the Republicans are successful at doing this, they're going to, of course, make a few more billionaires, and they're going to make the existing multimillionaires and billionaires a lot richer. They're going to make the rest of us a whole lot poorer, and they will be guaranteeing a major economic disaster. But it won't happen probably on Donald Trump's watch. It'll probably happen a couple of years down the road. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day. And welcome back. Al in Buffalo, New York, watching Free Speech TV on cable. Hey, Al, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Hey, can you imagine how far the civil rights movement would have gotten had it been run entirely by complainers for whom nothing was ever good enough to heal with integrating the Montgomery public transit system when the problem was so much larger? You know, I don't know if you've ever read the that op-ed by Rebecca Solnit, where she talks about a letter to my dismal allies, where, you know, they seem to be the ones, I'm referring to the burn your bus people, who they want to declare that the emperor always has no clothes, no matter what, no matter how good the 111th Congress was. And considering that it was the most productive Congress since the New Deal, according to the New York Times, these people are poison. They literally are the poison that is sucking the idealism, you know, that somewhere under this pile of bile that she says that, you know, the promiscuous idealism, the Puritans, that they, you know, because I once showed up at a forum and I go, it just seems to me like, you know, when this was at the time when Kathy Hochul we were trying to get her in. And I stood up there and I said, I don't know what you folks are talking about when you're talking about anarchy, and you're basically saying that you know, that Martin Luther King, what he did and how he galvanized millions of people to walk over a bridge full well knowing that they were going to be beaten. I mean, you know,
I don't get your point here, Al. Are you saying? You know, you're going. I get it that you're going after burning or bust folks. I don't know what that means.
These are the people that a lot of them. I have to say, a lot of them were involved with the Trump campaign, because you had a lot of these so-called Autobots that were forming on Facebook, and you could not compete against that, because this. Well, part of it was because of a guy named by the name of Robert Mercer. I don't know if you recognize that name.
Yeah, Robert Mercer is a billionaire who is the principal funder of the Trump campaign.
Right. So a lot of people, you had a mixture of the burn your bus people falling for this crazy yellow journalism that was like an infestation all over. I even fell for it, but then I realized.
I think a lot of that, Al, was disinformation and bots, literally bots, that were being funded by the Republicans. You know, the genuine question is you know, how much damage could be done. You know, this event last weekend in Chicago, you know, the people's gathering, the People's Summit. There was, you know, Roseanne DeMoro and others saying, hey, Bernie, let's start a new political party, a third party, and drive that to the presidency in 2020. That, I think, that's a huge mistake. I think giving up on the Democratic Party is a terrible mistake. And, I mean, it's a billion-dollar machine sitting there waiting for anybody to come in and take it over. The billionaires and the Tea Party took over the Republican Party. Progressives should be able to take over the Democratic Party. But anyhow, Al, thanks for the call. We'll be back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Boy, what a day. Jordan in Durham, North Carolina. Hey, Jordan, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing today, Tom?
Good. What's up?
I love your show. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I want to talk about, what do you think about capital punishment?
I think it's an abomination. It's murder by the state. It's very often inflicted on people who are minorities or are poor or both, and with some regularity, we kill people who are not guilty of anything. I'm totally opposed to capital punishment. Why do you ask, Jordan?
Well, thank you for taking my call.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Anna Maria in Decatur, Illinois. Hey, Anna Maria. What's up?
Hello, Tom. I just want to kind of blow up the idea of like what Medicaid people really are. I was actually involved in like poli-sci. I worked in Congress, and I vote all the time, as much as I possibly can, even when I'm in the hospital. And the problem with Medicaid, though, is that it fundamentally doesn't work. It still doesn't work. I think now it works even less. And there are programs like managed care option. So if you choose it, you're in a very small network. So they can keep you kind of circling around, just kind of chasing your tail, like an Ouroboros. And it's almost as if like if you're going to die, like they want you to die. They're encouraging you to die.
Anna Maria, I don't know what you're talking about. Medicaid, I mean, there's millions of Americans on Medicaid. You've got, about a third of them are children, about a third of them are elderly people. Pays for nursing homes for people all across the United States. I do not like the clawback provision that the Republicans inserted into Medicaid in the 1980s, during the Reaganista period. Yeah. But, there are lots and lots of people for whom Medicaid is literally a lifeline. And the Republicans are coming for it with a meat axe. And I think the last thing we should be doing is sitting around saying, oh, Medicaid is terrible, Medicaid is this, Medicaid is that. I'm not going to go there.
I'm not trying to actually say that it's not. I'm saying that there are lots of problems. There were really great aspects of it that have been completely chipped away as time has gone on. I'm one of the people who wants to attack it and say that it's a failure. I'm saying it's more like I wish it would return to what it used to be.
What it was before Reagan got a hold of it. I get that. But right now you've got the Republicans. They want to cut hundreds of billions of dollars over a period of a decade out of
they want
Medicaid.
To cut me out of it completely. I'm one of the people who I'm not old enough for Medicare, and I don't qualify for like a subsidy through Obamacare.
Right.
So
so you're taking the Medicaid expansion in Illinois?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But it's through Social Security.
Right.
And there were programs in place that you could appeal basically like any decision that was made against you. And also there were nurse lines that you could access if you had questions about a diagnosis or.
Sure. When did those go away, Anna Marie?
They disappeared. I mean, completely.
When?
There's no complaint.
When?
Like, I would say in the past 10 years or so, they've slowly but surely, like the nurses line access went away about 8 years ago. And then I would say that the complaint system, there isn't one. You can't complain about your doctor. You can't complain about access to a specialist or getting extra care or even getting like a ride to your doctor's visit.
Yeah. Anna Maria, I'm sorry to hear that you're not absolutely happy with Medicaid, and I agree that we need to do everything we can to fix it. And at that, I'm going to move along. Thank you for the call. Bob in Kalispell, Montana. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Hey, I was just kind of motivated to call by the fellow that was unhappy with Bernie or bust people. I was a Bernie supporter, worked my butt off for him, and when he didn't work, I did eventually give up and vote for Hillary. But I didn't stop there. I went down, and I'm now the precinct chairman for the 25th precinct here in Kalispell. And I'm going to do my best to make this Democratic Party become the party that it needs to be.
Yeah, and that it once was, by the way.
Yeah, it once was, exactly. I'm one of these old farts. I remember back in the day when you could work 40 hours a week and make a darn good living.
Yep.
It just isn't there anymore, and we need to get that back.
Yeah.
And all the complaining and whining is not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I disagree with this idea of let's start a third party. You know, let's take on the Democrats. No, we need to take over the Democratic Party. We need to be inside the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party's traditions are what we're calling for. And frankly, I think anybody who believes that Bernie or anybody else is going to form a third party and successfully run for the president is either misinformed or delusional. It's just not going to happen. Our the system that by which we elect people to, particularly the presidency, does not lend itself to a third party. I mean, we don't have proportional representation. We don't have a parliamentary system, and we're stuck with two parties basically.
That's it, and we've got a bus here that'll take us where we need to go. We just need to get on board.
Yeah, and we need to get a lot more folks on board, and we need to get a lot of good progressives out there. Yeah, well said. Bob, thanks a lot for the call. Jeff in San Francisco. Hey, Jeff, we got a minute to the end of the hour. What's up?
Okay, I just want to talk about a guaranteed income and how easy it would be because there's so much money wasted. They're about $3 trillion. We give every man, woman, and child, every adult $10,000, and every child $5,000 just out of the money that's spent on debt. And this is a fact that's never brought up, besides you do. But
you're saying that $3 trillion is made in interest payments every year in the United States?
Yes.
And that's across all, that's the corporate sector, the private sector, and the public sector, is that?
Right. I've read this exactly in Ellen Brown's book, and this is money they just print up. I mean, the Fed, and I mean this.
So an easy solution is Bernie's thing of low-income banking through the post office, and then individual states having their own banks.
Exactly.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Jeff, thanks a lot for the call. There's a lot of ways to fund a guaranteed minimum income, and that's one of them. That's absolutely one. Although you're going to have a bunch of billionaires on Wall Street, calling the politicians that they own, doing everything they can to prevent anything like that. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeats.com.
And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're trying to we're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, an unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Treman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Treman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. I mean, this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just, but there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal. And thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops, hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration and protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the pocket constitution from the ACLU. Right? So that's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards, and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who came, just dropping by, It was really nice, who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, what I'm asking here, what I'm, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it. And it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV. 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
The book is from the
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Deputy Attorney General, or Assistant Attorney General, or number 2, is whatever his title is. He's the guy below Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein. Just testified in the last hour before Congress that he has seen no good cause to fire Robert Mueller, the guy, the independent counsel, the special prosecutor, whatever phrase you want to use, the guy who is looking into the whole issue of whether Trump the Trump campaign was in some way, corruptly colluding with Russia or anybody else for that matter, to swing the election in the United States, and who was talking to whom when, and all that kind of stuff. And he was asked, because the a friend of the president's is this guy who owns Newsmax, one of the big right-wing news sites. He was on TV yesterday saying, well, the president's thinking of firing Mueller. Well, it turns out the president doesn't have the authority to fire Mueller. It's Rod Rosenstein. And Rod Rosenstein says, no, I would have to fire him for good cause. In the statute, there's actually a law that has to do with this that says that these, once these guys are put into place, they can only be fired for, dereliction of duty or committing a crime or good cause. In other words, something that can be justified. And so then he was asked, well, if the president says fire him to you, is that good cause? And he essentially answered no. The president would have to give me a good reason. He's asserting, and he also was asked, does Mueller have absolute independence from the Justice Department, or are you pulling his strings or constraining him in any way? And his answer was, I'm confident that I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm confident that that Mr. Mueller has complete independence. So this is probably not what you would consider good news in Trump world. But then, I keep saying he should be wanting an investigation. If he's insisting there's nothing there, I would think that the Trump campaign, I would think that the Russians, I would think everybody would be saying, let's get it all out in the open. Let's have an investigation. Let's find out what's going on. So, you know, the idea that Trump is thinking of firing this guy, the statement, the theology, the ideology here, the notion is that just the discussion of this is putting a cloud over the presidency and all this kind of thing. Well, perhaps, but it's a cloud that's not going to go away until somebody says definitively, here's what happened. So, you know, let's clean this thing up. Meanwhile, Dennis Rodman has arrived in North Korea. This actually may turn out to be a really good thing, in my opinion. Dennis Rodman is probably the only human being on Earth who is personal friends with Donald Trump and personal friends with Kim Jong-un. Or is it Kim Jong-il? Which one? Un is Il was his father, right? Okay. I mix up my Kim Jongs. And so Rodman, and in fact, this UVA student, Otto Warmbier, who was arrested in North Korea about a year and a half ago for taking a propaganda poster off the wall in the dormitory he was staying in. He was an exchange student in North Korea. He was sentenced to 15 years hard labor for stealing a poster. And apparently a year ago, he got food poisoning during his trial, and they gave him a sleeping pill, and he went to sleep and never woke up. And so he has been in a coma for a year. This has got to be just devastating to his family. And the good news is he's being shipped home right now as we speak. He's on a medevac plane out of North Korea. The bad news is he's still in the coma. So that's going on. And we'll see, whether Rodman can diffuse the high tension that is around because Trump has been saber rattling North Korea the same way that George W. Bush was when he was back when he gave that famous speech that David Frum wrote about the axis of evil being Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. 3 countries that at that point in time had no contact with each other whatsoever for all practical purposes. In fact, Iran and Iraq were enemies. They'd fought an 8-year war and, killed 2 million people, 1 million people on each side. We supported both sides, by the way, during that war. Covertly. But, we supported them. But this situation with North Korea is starting to get spooky. I mean, the Japanese are starting to have nuclear alerts, drills, where they practice, running for the bomb shelters in case North Korea nukes them. People in Hawaii are starting to get nervous. People on the west coast of the U.S. So, there's a lot going on here, and that's worth keeping track of. But at the same time that all of this stuff is going on, there's also a lot going on kind of in the background that we all need to be knowing about and talking about. So just a few things in the news of the day. The Secret Service, by the way, says we were the ones who put in the recording system for Nixon. We're the ones who took it out after Nixon left and Jerry Ford was president. And there has been no recording system since then. So if Donald Trump recorded his, the Secret Service is not saying this, but this is the obvious and logical inference from what they've said, that they have no recording system in the White House and no knowledge of any recordings being made. If that's the case, the only person who could have recorded James Comey when he was meeting with Donald Trump would be Donald Trump himself. And it turns out that Trump has threatened other people in the past by saying, I have recordings of our conversations, when in fact he didn't. And he admitted in sworn depositions that he had just lied about it. So we'll see where this one goes, right? Yesterday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Francisco backed up the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Ninth Circuit is famously liberal. The Fourth Circuit is famously conservative. They both ruled against Trump's Muslim ban. Both of them. This will now go to the Supreme Court. We'll see where this goes. But in the ruling, the court cited Trump's tweets, and they cited Sean Spicer's statement from the podium that a tweet by the president is considered an official statement by the president of the United States. Very interesting. This is kind of a variation on hoisted on his own petard, right? Victoria Jones, in her newsletter today, notes, as I watched the courtiers flatter President Trump at the cabinet meeting, I became more and more uncomfortable for them. Each member of the cabinet felt obliged to be more fawning, more effusive than the one who spoke before. They knew they were being scored on loyalty. So what if what they said about the state of the country was untrue? It only mattered that they kept their heads. This is Victoria Jones, and it's brilliant. Yesterday, I played this clip of Donald Trump talking about, this was back in 1992 with Charlie Rose, talking about how he loves getting revenge on people who aren't loyal to him. And I think it's worth playing again, just so we realize, you know, all those people in that room yesterday, this is what they were dealing with. Here's Donald Trump. Literally 1 minute? No, just a few seconds. Okay, we got to pull up the video here to get it going. You got it, Chris? There we go. This is Charlie Rose. There's Charlie Rose laughing like Billy Bush did, right? Wow. Wow. This is like a mob boss. And the people in that room yesterday in the cabinet, this has got to be tough, being a member of Donald Trump's cabinet. I mean, it's got to be tough. It's like, you know, okay, we're dealing with, you know, Don the Don, right? He's like, he thinks he's a mafia Don. He's insecure. It's bizarre. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
More of the news of the day, and your calls, my thoughts, all of the above, right after this. And welcome back. Michael in Imperial Beach, California. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Hartman, about Trump's cabinet spectacle yesterday. What are your thoughts on these quote-unquote intelligent people? Do these people even have integrity or dignity to the society they are supposed to represent?
I think Jim Mattis demonstrated that he does, but I think he was the only one.
He looked like a skeleton. But when they kneel down before a child who is 70 years old in front of the world, how can his cabinet sleep at night? Is it because they're rich? Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, Michael. I mean, thank you. Clearly, Trump assembled a cabinet largely of billionaires and multimillionaires. In fact, I think everybody in his cabinet is a multimillionaire, and at least, and then there's a bunch of billionaires as well. And they're going to look out for the interests of the multimillionaires and the billionaires. And that's what they've been doing. You know, striking down anti-pollution laws to make, dirty industries more profitable at the expense of human beings, communities. doing away with the fiduciary rule, or trying to. Actually, it just went into effect. So that the industry, the banking industry, the banksters could, make more money robbing us. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. Oh, breaking news: the CEO of Uber, Travis Kalanick, is taking a temporary leave of absence. Gee, who would have seen that coming? Paul in Benton, Pennsylvania. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Hey, I had an idea. What about if the liberals and the progressives took a cue from the Black Panthers back in the 60s, where they all showed up with long guns? It seems to me that that's the only thing that's going to stop the intimidation and scare them off. Is if every progressive, say showed up at a parade or a march or a rally, and they were all armed, I bet you all those Tea Party freaks and everything would go running for the hills.
Yeah, this is the problem that the Native Americans faced when Europeans first came to this continent. Was do we fight them and become like them, or do we avoid fighting them and retain our integrity? Because, I frankly don't want to go out and buy a gun and then, walk around carrying it with, to a demonstration where there's a bunch of right-wingers who are all armed. It's not part of my value system, and it's buying into their meme that, being armed gives you political power, being armed gives you, I get, what the Panthers did, and I respect what they did. And they certainly got Ronald Reagan to jump. I mean, within a week or so of Bobby Seale, as I recall, maybe Huey Newton too, showing up at the state capitol in California with those long guns, unloaded, actually. Within a few weeks of that, Reagan got gun control in California. I mean, just like that. Oh my God, black people with guns? But I don't think liberals with guns are going to be enough to intimidate them, and I don't think intimidation is a useful political tactic. So I would not go down that road. I understand where you're coming from, and I'm all in favor of standing up to them. But I think if we just arm up, we're just setting up more deaths.
Hi, I'm Valerie with Free Speech TV. We're proud to provide you with independent, unfiltered news and documentaries. And as our valued viewer, you can help us continue bringing Free Speech TV well into the future. Join our Pearly Gate Rebels, our planned giving program. Your gift of any size will help ensure democracy endures through an informed citizenry. You can donate property, money, or assets. It's easy. My spouse and I are proud Pearly Gate Rebels. We're doing our part to ensure that Free Speech TV will be here to deliver thought-provoking news and information well into the future. Join us. Call 877-378-8669 or email me at valerie@freespeech.org. Rebel against media owned by billionaires and become one of our Pearly Gate Rebels today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I told you in the first hour that the Republicans are trying to put together this giant, massive tax cut bill, a $600 billion tax cut bill, masquerading as a health care bill. They call it the American Health Care Act, the AHCA, because they discovered that the ACA actually polls like 70% of Americans like the ACA. Only about 50% of Americans like Obamacare, but 70% like the ACA. So the Republicans came up with that's the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. And so the Republicans came up with a tax cut bill that will decimate health care and throw 23 million people off the health care rolls, but they called it the AHCA to confuse you. I mean, this is the perfidy. This is how low these guys stoop. They don't give a rat's ass about the truth. They don't care about what's right. They don't care about the fate and future of Americans. They don't care about our health care. They don't care about whether we have food or clothing or even jobs. They, obviously they want our votes, but that's it. And they're willing to lie to get them, as they do regularly. I mean, Paul Ryan was on TV this morning just, lying through his teeth. We're not going to see a public copy of this bill until just before the vote. This is bizarre. Also, Victoria Jones in her newsletter this morning, Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke said on Monday he has recommended that President Trump reduce the size of the Bears Ear National Monument in Utah. It's a 1.35 million acre area. It was designated by President Obama. There are 27 national monuments that Zinke and the Trump administration intend to review. Now, why would they do this? Because this federal land, in many cases, is sitting on top of coal or oil or copper or iron, or growing on these federal lands is lumber. And they want it. The billionaires want it. The extraction companies want it. After all, America, now that we're no longer a major industrial power, our major exports now are raw materials. That's one of the definitions of a third world country. Prior to the Reagan administration, we were the world's largest importer of raw materials and exporter of finished goods. We used to import iron ore and export televisions and washing machines and cars. Now we're the world's largest importer of finished goods and, importer of finished goods and exporter of raw materials. Now we ship coal and iron ore and pulp paper, wood off to China. They take that, make steel out of it, make computers out of it, put it in boxes with cardboard made from our wood, and sell it back to us as finished products. We have become the definition of a third world country. And Ryan Zinke wants to extend that, to expand that, to turn America to have more of the extractive industries of the world. You'll recall when John McCain and Jeff Flake screwed the Indians, the Apache Indians in Arizona, by giving away the Apache Tears land to a mining company. It was an Australian mining company that they gave this sacred land to the Apaches to. This is the Republican idea of America. Is, steal everything that's not nailed down. Sell it off, make as much money as possible, and then take missile silos in Kansas and turn them into multi-hundred-million-dollar estates where you can live 100 feet underground for the next 50 years while climate change or nuclear war wipe us all out. This is their idea.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. We'll be back. Stick around. And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, an unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Treman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa, Last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Truman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. And this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just... But there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal, and thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops. Hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration or protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the Pocket Constitution from the ACLU. Okay? So that's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards, and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, you know, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who came just dropping by, you know. It was really nice, who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, you know, what I'm asking here, what I'm, you know, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it, and it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, oh, gee, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV. 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And time to pick up your calls. Alan in Crown Point, Indiana. Hey, Alan, what's on your mind today?
Hey, sir, I would like to have your opinion on this fiduciary put out by the Department of Labor. I'm a retiree. I'm, 78 years old. I just wondered what your thinking is on this.
You're talking about the fiduciary rule?
Yes.
Yeah, what the fiduciary rule says, for the first time, bizarrely enough, is that if you, Alan, go to a financial counselor or investment advisor, and you give them your life savings, and they invest it on your behalf, that they have to be transparent with you, that they have to tell you if there is something that they could buy as an investment that would work more to your advantage. If they take your money and put it into a fund that pays them a 5% commission as opposed to a fund that pays them a 1% commission, even though you'd make more money from the one that makes the 1% commission, but they want to go to the 5% commission because that makes them more money. That's how the industry has been operating up until right now. And just a few weeks ago, the fiduciary rule that came out of the Obama administration took effect. Republicans are trying to repeal it so that your investment advisor can go back to lying to you about where he's putting your money or she is putting your money. But that's basically what the fiduciary rule does, is it establishes, fiduciary is like financial responsibility. It establishes a legal basis for financial responsibility on the part of financial advisors and retirement and investment advisors. Make sense?
Yeah. And,
okay.
I would like to ask your opinion on the 1 or 2%, depending on your type of account. This is going to go back to the government. This 1 or 2% points are going back to the government.
No, nothing goes back to the government. This rule has nothing to do with money going to or from the government. This rule, the way that there's two kinds of investment advisors that you can hire. The one kind is fee only, where you pay them, $100 a month, $1,000 a month, whatever it may be, and they handle your money for you. And, really, really rich people tend to go with those kind of folks. Although, I suppose it varies. I'm not really, really rich, and then the second kind is basically a percentage. A person who says, I'm going to invest your money for you, and I'll take 1% off the top, or I'll take, whatever like that. And what a lot of people have done up until now is they have said, I'm just going to go with the guy that I pay the fee to because he doesn't then take my money and invest it. I invest my money. In other words, this guy simply gives me advice. He sells me advice for $100 an hour. And so if he says that I should, with my, account at, Fidelity or whatever it may be, one of these companies that lets you trade stocks, if he says that I should be in the stock market right now, or I should be in the bond market right now, then I'll just do that. And that's sort of like, one of our underwriters, one of our advertisers is the Aiden forecast. The Aiden sisters, these two sisters who live down in Costa Rica. They're Americans. They're expats. And they write this great investment newsletter. That's kind of that category. They don't make, they don't make more or less money depending on where I put my money based on their advice. On the other hand, there are people where you literally hand your money over to them and they invest it on your behalf. And they make money by taking your money and buying funds, and then those funds pay them a kickback, basically, a commission. And that commission goes to the investment advisor. And so prior to the fiduciary rules, there were funds, well, there still are. There are funds that pay really high commissions. They don't perform particularly well, but they pay high commissions. And there are funds that perform very well and don't pay high commissions. And part of the reason why they perform so well is because, the commissions aren't coming out of them. Am I making sense now, Alan?
You're making sense, yes.
Okay.
So actually, these percentages go back to the brokerage.
That's right. That's right. If you have the kind of broker who takes your money and invests it on your behalf, then he or she is the person who is getting the commissions, not the federal government.
Okay.
Federal government's got nothing to do with it. All they did was pass a law saying that if you're advising somebody, if you're taking somebody's money and giving them, financial advice, you have to tell them the truth. Prior to a few months ago, they didn't have to tell you the truth. That's really all it comes down to. And the Republicans want to repeal this. And in fact, they've committed to repealing this before the end of this year. Alan, thanks for the call. And thanks for listening to WCPT. Mitch in Burton, Washington. Hey, Mitch, what's on your mind today?
It's Mick.
Oh, Mick, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Thank you for being a part of our world. And I would like to suggest to your listeners, if they're feeling discouraged and disappointed about current events, to stop the corporations the best way you can, and that's by not buying things. If you can stop consuming and start downsizing, you will be able to get out of the riptide by swimming to the side rather than trying to swim to shore.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And more than half of America right now cannot withstand a $1,000 shock. And as I recall, actually, it's even more than half of America now can't withstand a $500 shock. And, without having to go to credit cards or savings, or it just wipes them out. And a solution to that, in addition to, working politically to try to raise the standard of living for everybody in this country, is to downsize. And a lot of Americans are doing that.
And many are feeling discouraged because they feel powerlessness.
Yeah.
And it's the fear that's creating the helplessness.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And helplessness leads to rage. And rage then gets expressed by doing things like voting for Donald Trump, it seems. Mick, thanks a lot for the call. Well said. Albert in Hiltons, Virginia. Hey, Albert, what's on your mind today?
I was wanting to talk about this Obamacare and Social Security. I had a heart attack back in 2014, and I got on Social Security, and my wife's totally disabled, and she took care of her parents all her life. We'd been married 42 years. Well, whenever she went to get help, she's got all kinds of issues going on, and we went to social services trying to get some help there. They said they couldn't do nothing for her there, but then they told me that I could get Medicaid, to take care of my Humana and my Medicare. Mm-hmm. And anyway, in April, they dropped, in Virginia, they dropped the Medicaid, and I didn't know it until just recently. And they sent me 2 letters yesterday. I took them to Social Security Board where they told me I had to take them back to Social Services. I took them back to them, and she's working on it, trying to get it reinstated. And now I got a letter yesterday whenever I got home. I took it back down there. They told me I'd take it to Social Security Board, and now I'm getting $1,300 a month. I was getting $1,700, and then my pension from work was like $700.
So Albert, where I get your story. What's the point you're making?
The point I'm making is, how can they tell you that you're eligible for Medicaid and put you on it, and then
take you off
it in April, and then wait till here it is the middle of June, and tell you that they're going to have to take it out of your Social Security because the Medicaid's no longer going to pay for it.
Right. I don't, Albert, I'm sorry that I don't know the details of your situation, and I'm not all that, in fact, I'm not at all up to date on Virginia, on the state of Virginia, and whether they've expanded Medicaid. I assumed that they had. They've got Terry McAuliffe is the governor there, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and he's a good Democrat, and but although I don't know what the legislature has done, and so I just, Albert, I'm sorry, I can't give you the answer. I just don't know, but I wish you the very best, Albert. Good luck. Thank you for the call. Jeff in Eagle Nest, New Mexico. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Albert?
Good. I'm calling you about, according to the Santa Fe Reporter, the Koch brothers are coming back into New Mexico. I'm sure they want to keep a Koch brothers controlled governor like we have now, Susana Martinez, and probably want to go back after the House after we took it back in the last election. Of course, we're one of the strongholds for the Democratic Party, one of the states that went for Hillary in the election, won back the House.
Right. So, Jeff, how are the Koch brothers coming after New Mexico?
Well, they're funneling money back in. There's an organization that they have here called the Rio Grande Foundation, which they claim not to have a connection with, but we know they do according to the book Dark Money. They're one of the 40, organizations that they funnel money through their shell organizations throughout the country. Right. And of course, we're right here. We're already starting our races for the 2018, and we have a lot of indivisible groups out here. I'm a strong member of the Democratic Party, always have been, and I see people coming up and getting involved that never have before. I think they're pretty worried, and they would really love to keep their stronghold here.
Oh yeah, they want to maintain an oligarchic form of government and an absolute commitment to that. Jeff, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And we'll be back with Patrick Gavin at Talk Media News right after this break. And welcome back. Will in San Francisco watching us on YouTube. Hey, Will, what's up?
Hi.
Hey, Will.
Hi, hey, how you doing? I just wanted to, sorry, I wasn't sure if that was me.
Yeah, that's you.
I just wanted to discuss how we just have a lack of a common cause now, it seems. That was relevant in back in, the Second World War, and it's such a great opportunity now with climate change to really bring our country together. And you can see that the Democrats really are trying to do that.
And the Europeans are doing that successfully.
And it seems so obvious, and I just can't understand, especially with defense, and I just can't understand these guys other than just breaking it down and just big money. And Jay Mayer's book, Dark Money, is just perfect.
Yeah.
She just explains it, and it's just so upsetting to me. And I think people are, especially me, I'm a young guy, and I see people turning to drugs, and then, like you're saying, older generations getting angry, and it's just, we don't have that common cause anymore.
Yeah.
And I think we need it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that was. The point that you're making basically is the one that Al Gore was making in 2000, and has been ever since, frankly, and I think it's excellent. It's excellent, but you've got some billionaires who made their money off fossil fuels, and who are continuing to make money off fossil fuels, and even though the Koch brothers are worth $80 billion according to press reports, they apparently want more. And are willing to fund, so-called scientists and so-called think tanks that will push out the message that, hey, we there's no such thing as climate change. There's no need to mitigate, the effects of all this carbon in the atmosphere, and yes, the climate is changing. It always has, and all that kind of stuff, and just so that they can make more money. And I view that as a sickness. I think that this is hoarding syndrome and obsessive compulsive disorder, hoarding syndrome, only instead of hoarding newspapers and tin cans, these guys are hoarding money. And our entire nation is the victim of this obsessive behavior on the part of not just the Koch brothers, but a number of billionaires and multi-billion-dollar corporations like ExxonMobil in the fossil fuel world. And ironically, you had Rex Tillerson just an hour ago before Congress saying he still believes in the Paris Accord.
Oh my God! And these guys, our system is set up to reward this kind of people like President Trump. They reward them.
Yeah.
Because our system is just so out of whack, it seems like, the Pope says it right, there's worship of money. It's just...
Yeah. Well, this is what started in 71 with the Powell memo, went on steroids in 76 with the Buckley versus Vallejo decision, which Lewis Powell wrote, which said that giving money to politicians is constitutionally protected free speech. Prior to that, from the founding of the Republic, the George Washington administration, until that point, the Jerry Ford administration in 1976, giving money to politicians had been considered, at law, had been considered a behavior that could be regulated. And the Supreme Court said, no, it's not. It's free speech. And at that point, the billionaires stepped up and basically took over and brought us Ronald Reagan. Will, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News, brought to you by Alan Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, The Elements of a Great Working Life, and goatsfortheoldgoat.com. On the line with us, Patrick Gavin with Talk Media News. Hey, Patrick.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So what's going on in the world today?
Well, I think in just, 45 minutes or so, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is going to speak in public and talk about, answer a lot of questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee about a number of things. I think that, for Washington insiders, this is going to be maybe not as interesting as Comey, but very much up there. The risk of damage, I think, for Sessions is high, and I imagine you'll see just as much fireworks during this hearing as perhaps you saw last hearing. In part because Sessions, I think, knows that his boss is going to be watching and watching intently. I mean, I think Comey, I don't think Comey necessarily delivered a smoking gun last week, which bought Trump some time, but I don't think used that time to his advantage in any way. I think some things to look out for what Sessions might or might not talk about, or at least the questions he'll be asked. I think will Sessions answer any questions about his involvement in Comey's firing? Or I think the big thing we'll be looking for is he going to come right out of the bat and just cite executive privilege and claim that this is an ongoing investigation, which I think is a smart assumption that he will probably end up doing that.
Really?
I think so. I mean, I think on some things. I think that.
He could do that by claiming executive privilege. That executive privilege is derived from conversations or interactions with the president. Alternatively, he could claim that he doesn't want to step on Mueller's investigation, and that would be way short of invoking executive privilege, and yet that would arguably be something that probably they wouldn't challenge him on. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that'll definitely hinge more on the ongoing investigation part. I mean, I do think he knows. Part of the reason he's even doing this in public in the first place, which he didn't have to do, is I think he knew that the optics of this are important. There were these rumors, I think, last week that he wasn't going to do it in public, and those quickly got squashed, not because, of any sort of do-gooderism by the Trump administration, but, the idea that the Attorney General would not be doing this in public. I think even the Trump and the White House knew that the optics of that would be bad.
In a way, this is sort of like, Julius Caesar, the play by Shakespeare that is now so controversial in New York City, in that we don't know, is Jeff Sessions going to play the role of Brute? Is he going to turn on the president in this testimony and save himself? Because up till this point, a lot of people thought of him as the evil Keebler elf, but on the Republican side, he was fairly well regarded. I mean, he was a good, white supremacist from the South, most of his life and career. And, so is he going to regain his reputation among his colleagues and peers, or is he going to, go down into history as a toady for Donald Trump? Given the cabinet meeting yesterday, it looks like the latter. Mattis was the only one who didn't essentially bend down and kiss Trump's butt. But and it's going to be interesting to see how long Mattis survives as a consequence of that. But
I think to that point, you could look at it both ways. I think the fact that after Trump expressed some dismay with Sessions, I believe that was a week and a half ago,
right.
Sessions actually tendered his resignation, which you could look at as perhaps a principled stance, right? That he believes in what he says and is willing to leave to stand by it. That being said, I mean, there are some reports reports coming out of the White House today, which I kind of put in the sort of quasi-unreliable category. It just seems as if we get conflicting reports all the time now. But that Sessions might actually go on the counterattack on this and really, frame some of Comey's testimony as exaggerated or, salacious or completely false. So that's another scenario. That in fact, I think taking a page out of his boss's playbook. I mean, Trump knows you need an enemy and you need to go on an attack, and to be dormant is death, right? So I think if Sessions were to sort of recognize the fact that his boss is probably sitting there with a bowl of popcorn watching intently, and if he does want to please him, if he does want to take that scenario that perhaps you posited there, that in fact maybe he will go on the counterattack. It's tricky, though, because you're right. He is a creature of Washington. He's a creature of the Senate. These are his friends and colleagues. At least they were 6 months ago. So it is sort of hard to imagine. But, it'll be very interesting.
Although there's also the old Harry Trumanism, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So what else in the world is going on that you think is of consequence, Patrick?
Well, healthcare. This remains to be the issue that the Capitol Hill continues to wrestle with. Mitch McConnell now wants to get something done by July 4th.
You're talking about the $600 billion cut in taxes on billionaires, on investment income.
Yes, I'm talking about the plan that has about an 8% approval rating in the American public. But Mitch McConnell, I think, very much wants to get it done. To be honest, we have very little idea what's in it. They're not showing any drafts of their health care bill. They have no plan to publicly release it, I think, until the very last minute. There was this, I think, clip last week with Claire McCaskill even telling Orrin Hatch that, she has no idea what's in this bill and she would like to know. The real question is, of course, whether or not they can get something done and how much political capital they're willing to spend to do it.
Right.
Mitch McConnell wants to get it done by July 4th, which I think is ambitious. There's been some reports that maybe Congress will even put in some work during their August vacation to get it done, which I think,
My understanding is the Republicans have basically committed to the billionaires, to the Kochs and Mercers and whatnot, that they are going to hand them $2 trillion this year. And that $1 trillion will be from doing away with the Affordable Care Act, and $1 trillion will be from actually passing legislation specific to, quote, taxes, end quote, because the Affordable Care Act imposes just a little short of $1 trillion in, over a decade period on basically billionaires, with this 3.9% increase in the top capital gains rate, which right now is 20%. Most billionaires only pay capital gains, so their top tax rate is 20%. Right now it's 23.9%. And they're furious about that 3.9% that goes to pay for, the Medicaid expansion and for the subsidies for Obamacare for average people. And so, go ahead.
I mean, that's a big risk because so far all these pieces of legislation that you mentioned aren't very popular. So they might win over these billionaires, but their base is slowly, I think, losing faith. And especially if they can't get anything done when they control all three houses of Congress, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it is. Patrick Gavin, well said. Talk Media News. Thank you, Patrick.
Take care.
Bye.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. on the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, an unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Treman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa, last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Treman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. I mean, this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just, but there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal. And thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops, hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration and protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the pocket constitution from the ACLU. Okay? So that's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who were just dropping by, It was really nice, who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, what I'm asking here, what I'm, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it. And it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV. 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with me is the op-ed columnist for the Irish Times. IrishTimes.com is the website. Fintan O'Toole, talking to us from Ireland. Fintan, am I saying your name right?
You are. It's very impressive, Tom. Thank you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I read your article and titled "What Connects Brexit, the DUP," which is this relatively obscure, at least to Americans, political party out of Northern Ireland that Theresa May, the Conservatives, are going to form an alliance with to govern the UK. So anyhow, back to the title of your article: "What Connects Brexit, the DUP, Dark Money, and a Saudi Prince?" And this is a pretty shocking article. So first of all, tell our viewers, listeners, what is the DUP? I just did a little thumbnail sketch of it, but I'm sure you could do a much better job than me. And why would it be surprising that the DUP were suddenly to have a lot of money to engage in political activity?
So the DUP is the largest political party in Northern Ireland. Just to remind people, Ireland is divided. Most of the island is, from where I'm speaking to you today, is the Republic of Ireland, which broke away to achieve independence from the United Kingdom in 1922. And the 6 northern counties of Northern Ireland remain part of the UK, and therefore they were involved in the Brexit debate last year, the infamous Brexit referendum.
Right, because in part, my understanding is that their objection was that if the UK separated from the European Union, that they would arguably have to reinstall the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, because now Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, but Ireland is an independent nation and is still part of the EU.
That issue of the border is a huge one for everybody in Ireland, because we don't want the reimposition of a hard border across our island. This kind of disappeared with the peace process since the late 1990s, and life has got a lot better. So we don't really want this to happen. However, the DUP did want it to happen, right? So the DUP is a...
Oh, I have it backwards.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the DUP was in favor of Brexit. And it is historically a party which comes out of an evangelical church called the Free Presbyterian Church, which was headed by a sort of infamous hot-blooded preacher called Ian Paisley. It was his party. And it was a very hardline Protestant anti-Catholic party. It's since kind of moderated its position. It's gone into sharing power with Sinn Féin, which is the main Catholic nationalist party in Northern Ireland. But it retains a very strong sense of itself as wanting to be seen as being kind of ultra-British.
Right.
And also it retains very strong positions on social issues. So it's against abortion, it's against same-sex marriage, it wants creationism taught in schools, it denies climate change. So it has a whole suite of those kinds of policies.
Bizarre.
What happened then?
Go ahead.
Last year was this very kind of strange moment when 2 days before the Brexit vote, almost a year ago, people in the mainland Britain were going to work, there's a kind of free sheet newspaper that's very widely distributed in most of the major cities, particularly in London, and they got their newspaper as they were getting on the train or whatever with a wraparound supplement, a very kind of glossy wraparound supplement, which was telling them to vote for Brexit, so to leave the European Union. And the branding on this showed that it was paid for by the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party.
So this obscure political party
in... It doesn't operate in Britain. It only operates in Northern Ireland.
Right, so this obscure political party in Northern Ireland is paying hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds for an advertisement in a newspaper in Great Britain itself, or in England, rather.
Exactly, and this we now know it cost about $300,000 or a little bit more, so it was a pretty big one-off expense.
So where'd they get the money?
For a small Irish political party, Northern Irish political party, right? No, there's not that kind of money in Northern Irish politics, right? So we kind of started asking questions about where did you get this money from? And eventually they first said they didn't know, and then they said, well, it was nothing to do with us. And then the story gets kind of murkier and murkier. It begins to read like a kind of John le Carré novel, because what they eventually say is, well, we got the money from, and it wasn't just this money, we got more money. We got in total about $600,000, right? So they said we got this from the Constitutional Research Council. Now, none of us had ever heard of the Constitutional Research Council. What is this body? And it's a body, if you Google it, you won't find it. It's not, you might Google some articles about it now, but you won't find a website, you won't find any description of it as a legal entity, you won't find a list of directors, you won't find anything really about it. And it just turns out, as far as we know, it's one guy in Scotland, a guy in Glasgow in Scotland called Richard Cook. And so some people have been trying to find out, well, what the hell, who is this guy? He doesn't look like he's got this kind of money to throw around. He's not a multi-billionaire. And Cook won't say where the money came from. The DUP says, well, we don't know where the ultimate source of it is. However, this is a very strange connection, because this guy, Cook, who's a very minor sort of businessman, turns out if you do a search of company records in Scotland, to have had a company, he was a co-director of a company with a major Saudi prince, a major prince from Saudi Arabia, who had been at various points, the chief spokesman for the Saudi government. He'd been Saudi Minister for Finance, and intriguingly had been head of Saudi intelligence.
So why would Saudi intelligence or a Saudi billionaire want Brexit?
This is a question we really don't know the answer to. One of the oddities here is that the son of this Saudi prince is the Saudi ambassador to the United Kingdom and Ireland, right? So obviously the family has very, very strong direct connections in London, in England. There's some speculation that the Saudis would be probably quite happy with Brexit because they want to have a very close relationship with the UK, and a lot of that relationship is military. The UK sells them a lot of arms. The EU tends to be, it's by no means purer than pure on these issues, but it tends to be a little bit more cautious about selling arms to repressive regimes. And the Saudis, of course, are an extremely oppressive tyranny. Also involved, of course, in the Yemen, in very, very significant human rights abuses and killing civilians. So the European Union tends to be a bit more skeptical of this, and the UK tends to be a bit less so. And this is speculation.
Right.
That might be one of the reasons why the Saudis would like Brexit. Because
is this? We're talking with Fintan O'Toole, an op-ed columnist with the Irish Times. IrishTimes.com is the website, from Ireland. And Fintan, is this widely known? I mean, I have no idea sitting here in Washington, D.C., whether the article of yours that I read was just, an obscure article that, I don't mean obscure in a negative way, but I mean, relatively speaking, that only appeared in the Irish Times, or is this story getting legs in the United Kingdom? Is it going viral? Is it, are people saying, hey, wait a minute, Theresa May, why are you hooking up with this party that is tied into this Scottish prince and et cetera?
Yeah.
Excuse me, this Saudi prince.
It's obviously kind of been around since last year. It was kind of obvious that these people were publishing this propaganda stuff pro-Brexit. It was marked all over the DUP, and people were kind of saying, what the hell is that?
Right.
But then, of course, Brexit itself was such a huge sensational story that it happened. It sort of blew it away. So people had been asking questions, then it was gone 2 days later. And there's a few of us have been kind of asking questions about it. There's a very, very good website called Open Democracy, which works on transparency issues, financial issues. And they've been digging away at it, but nobody has really been able to get a proper answer as to what really is the source of this money and why was it given. So it sort of has been bubbling away under the surface, and then a strange thing happened over the weekend. So suddenly on Saturday morning, you had the results of the UK elections. Theresa May didn't get her majority. And people in Britain are suddenly realizing, oh my God, our government is now really dependent on this very small, pretty extreme Democratic Unionist Party. Who are they? And one of the things you could kind of see the effects of is people sort of Googling, saying, who are the DUP? And I suppose one of the things that started coming up online was the piece that I had written, which became the most read thing on the Irish Times website over the weekend. Now, if you think there were lots of other very immediate stories, this was a piece that I'd written, I think, 6 weeks ago. And all over Saturday, all over Sunday, and into Monday, it was the most read thing on our newspaper website.
Right. And
you can see what's happening there, which is people in Britain who don't know anything about the Democratic Unionist Party suddenly realizing, what? Who are these people? What's going on? And really kind of sharing it. And it's a kind of classic social media viral story, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So we have about a minute and a half, Fintan. Where does this go?
Well, so at the moment, it sort of lies with what's called the Electoral Commission, which is the independent body in the UK that's supposed to run elections. It's also responsible for the referendum. And there's an interesting anomaly, right? So the Electoral Commission says, look, Northern Ireland is exempted from having to, the parties don't have to say the source of their funding, which is disgraceful in itself, but they're supposed to know the source of their funding, right? So they're supposed to know, for example, that a foreign government isn't putting money into their election campaigns, right? So they can't accept anonymous donations. The Electoral Commission says they have to know this. The Democratic Unionist Party is saying, well, we don't know, and it doesn't really matter. So it sort of lies there at the moment.
It sounds like the Scottish businessman was basically acting like a money launderer.
Well, I wouldn't like to make any allegations against the person. I think what we'd like to know is what was he doing? What is the real source of this money? So I don't think anybody believes that this person in himself put his hand in his own pocket and gave this money. I think this is part of a larger phenomenon that's now happening, which is that you've got a very, very unstable British government as a result of the elections last week. And you have a lot of people in Britain, a lot of British media kind of waking up to the fact that they're suddenly dependent on this very small party that they don't know a lot about. And this small party, the DUP, in turn, is suddenly, there's a spotlight on it, right, over a lot of different things. Right. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable with what they're seeing. They don't like its kind of, very extreme conservative policies. And they're alarmed at the fact that it may have such an outsized influence on British politics, on the way Brexit is conducted, and indeed on British history. I mean, this is a very historic moment for Britain. So I think it's going to be interesting over the next few weeks as maybe a wider British media starts to focus on who this party are and what their funding might be.
We live in interesting times. Fintan O'Toole, op-ed columnist with the Irish Times. You can read his article, What Connects Brexit, the DUP, Dark Money, and a Saudi Prince over at irishtimes.com. Fintan, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Tom.
And people can tweet you at F. O'Toole.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
That's at FOTOOLE or at Irish Times. We'll be back. And welcome back. Lorraine in Oroville, California. Hey, Lorraine, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Well, I was thinking about calling in about all kinds of things, but interesting enough, when they asked what I was concerned about, I told them that I'm a descendant of the California Indian tribe, and I know that the Republicans have been just really, admiring and talking of Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
And in view of what's been going on, say, for instance, at Standing Rock, the Indian reservation, where they're getting ready to pollute the river and, driving it right through their cemetery, that happened here in California and probably all over the country.
Mm.
And you had said something about, the early contact, that the Indians, they welcomed the people at first, and then when they found out how destructive and greedy they were going to be for the land, they started to fight back. So that's where all the, the friction started.
Right.
I think they were friendly, peaceful people here, had a beautiful country, knew how to manage the land. And so, we don't have time to go into the whole history. I happen to be the kind of the unofficial historian for my tribe, which is the Concal Maidu of Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And we live on a ridge between the two branches of the Feather River.
Mm-hmm.
And the Oroville Dam, that they've been having a lot of publicity because the spillway broke and dangerous flooding and all that. I don't know if you heard about it. But
Is that on a reservation?
No.
Oh, it's just nearby.
No, the water is the drainage from our tribal area is the water that goes into the dam.
Oh.
That's the beginning of the California water system.
Wow.
And
You really are the river keepers. Water keepers.
Used to be.
Yeah.
It's all way underwater. It's about almost 400 feet deep at the little community that was called Enterprise.
Yeah.
Where a lot of my family came from, and then Moortown was up further up on the mountain. The actual Feather Falls.
Yeah. Was your tribe successful in maintaining their language, or was that stripped away from you by?
No, this is what I was coming to. Yale University published a book this year, authored by Benjamin Madley, M-A-D-L-E-Y.
Mm-hmm.
The title is An American Genocide, the United States and the California Indian Catastrophe. So our leaders, the elders, old people that would have been able to pass the culture on were wiped out immediately. It's a true book. I'm really glad this man did. He made a study, probably 50 years, of doing the research, documenting everything. He's got statistics about thousands of people that died. Maybe 3 here, 5 there, a whole village. And how the land was completely taken away.
Mm-hmm.
People sent to reservations, but I know back, when I was a little younger, I used to think it's so hypocritical of the American government to go to all these countries and do something to try to rescue people who were oppressed and being killed by their own leaders, and that's still going on now.
Yeah, right here in the United States.
What happened here in America.
Yeah. Lorraine, thank you. The title of that book was American Genocide, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lorraine. Thanks for the call. Great talking to you.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Norman in Washington, D.C. Hey, Norman, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. How are you this morning?
I'm well. What's up?
Good. You know, in this metropolitan area, it's roughly about a 60-mile circle around D.C., which encompasses Prince George's County, Maryland, Baltimore, Maryland, Montgomery County, and Northern Virginia. We have better than 2 million African Americans living in that particular jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
We don't own one automobile dealership. We don't own one beverage distribution center, be it alcohol or soft drinks. And, you know, you reach the point, and this picture is just about across the entire country, to be quite frank with you.
Mm-hmm.
In all of our large cities, we're being moved out so fast that it's almost impossible to believe. I've seen since 1980, we've lost over 150,000 African Americans in Washington, D.C. alone. And the horrible part about that is, from a political standpoint, they don't go to one central location. They're scattered. The result of that is you're losing now your vote power, to be quite frank with you.
It's like a diaspora.
Yes. Now, the next step is, after that takes place, then your dollars become somewhat fragmented. And it's a horrible situation. Boycotts used to be our vehicle, not just marching, making a lot of noise, but boycotting, stop buying these products. But for some reason, we seem to have lost that vehicle to a great degree. Yeah. Now, maybe you can help me in this regard. I understand that Trump passed an executive order, if I'm not mistaken, that churches now can be involved in religious as well as secular events.
No, he has not. He has committed, and he campaigned on undoing the Johnson Amendment, which is a law. You can't knock it down with an executive order. It would require an act of Congress. And the Johnson Amendment says that if a church engages in political activity, they lose their tax exemption.
So I was under the impression that that had been put into effect.
No, it has not. To the best of my knowledge, it has not been put into effect. Although, for the last 5, 6, 7 years, there have been a bunch of right-wing churches that have been openly engaging in political activity and thumbing their nose at the IRS. And the IRS just says, we don't have the resources to enforce this.
See, the tough problem we have is in our communities, it's the focal point for the most part.
Yeah.
And you'll find out that we're heavily involved in our churches overall. And if they could be involved, where every Sunday boycotts were stressed, where we got a unified group of people there on a large basis. You know, there's some very large, as I'm sure you're well aware of, Prince George's County, there's some huge churches out there, 20,000, 30,000 membership, where they could be active in that area. We could,
you know, if the African American churches simply looked at what, you know, the right-wing, largely white evangelical churches are doing, where they're nakedly, openly engaging in political activity and just defying the government. I mean, it seems to work for the right-wingers. Maybe it wouldn't work for African-American churches. I don't know, but a good point. Thanks for the call. Great talking.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls, your thoughts for the day, right after this. Sticker. And welcome back. It's the Free Speech TV fundraising fund membership, all of that, whatever the official phrase is for it. We're doing it now. We're trying to we're keeping this network going and building this network with your help. 877-378-8669 is the phone number. Michael Treman, a manager at a solar company in Binghamton, New York, decided that he was going to run against the mayor, Richard David, who was a Republican. Michael Treman was going to run as a Democrat. Shouldn't be news, right? 4 hours after Treman went on local radio to discuss his challenge, I'm reading from Newsweek, he received emails directed at his wife and 3 children expressing heinous attempts to scare me off, he later said. That same day as Treman returned home from picking up his 2-year-old and 11-month-old children from a babysitter, An unidentified man in a truck yelled "liberal scumbag" and threw a full soda container that hit Truman in the back while he was protecting his infant. That was in New York. In Iowa last week, Kim Weaver, a Democratic candidate for Congress in Iowa, dropped her challenge to high-profile Republican Representative Steve King. She said, during my 2016 campaign, I've received very alarming acts of intimidation, including death threats. While some may say enduring threats are just part of running for office, my personal safety has increasingly become a concern. Truman actually did more than just drop out of politics. He sold his house and moved out of his hometown. I mean, this is how toxic politics have gotten in the United States in the era of Heil Trump, right? And Richard Spencer and you know, all this kind of stuff. And I guarantee you, if a Republican had pulled out of a race and literally moved out of town because of threats, it would be wall to wall on every single news network in America. Of course, Fox would run it 24/7. It would become another, you know, like the so-called new Black Panther Party that Fox was all hysterical about because, 10 years ago, 3 guys showed up at a polling place to protect the you know, people's right to vote. I mean, it's just, but there's going to be no discussion of this in the national media because it's Democrats who are the victims here. This is why it's so important to have independent media in the United States. You know, the corporate media is totally in the bag for the Republican Party. If it wasn't, you wouldn't have Republicans running this country right now, because when you look at the policies of Republicans, the vast majority of Americans disagree with virtually all of them. Free Speech TV is an essential piece of America's media landscape. You can help keep Free Speech TV on the air and keep this kind of programming going by calling now 877-378-8669 with and by the way, whatever you give, you call in and you make a $100 contribution. Steve is matching up to $10,000. He will double that, so your $100 becomes $200. Whatever you give, it's going to get matched. That's a big deal. And thank you, Steve. So with a $60 contribution, Free Speech TV will send you a pocket constitution and the Know Your Rights. Oops, hold it over here. And the Know Your Rights cards, you know, one for if you're at a demonstration or protest. These are from the ACLU. And the other if you're gay and going to college. And the pocket constitution from the ACLU. Right? So that's with a $60 gift, $5 a month. With a $120 gift, you get a copy of Howard Zinn's book, The People's History of America. With a $240 gift, you get a copy of my book, What Would Jefferson Do?, plus the Pocket Constitution, plus 2 Know Your Rights at protests or LGBT rights cards, and a Free Speech TV sticker. With a $360 gift, you get Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the U.S., The Voices of the People's History, Pocket Constitution, and a Free Speech TV sticker. And with a $1,000 gift, come to Washington, D.C., and I'd be glad to buy you lunch. And, you know, we can spend an hour together and get to know each other. And my experience of those has been great. I've really, really met some wonderful people. In fact, just last week, we had lunch with a couple that had donated to Free Speech TV who came just dropping by, you know. It was really nice. Who had donated $1,000. So those are the premiums, but really, you know, what I'm asking here, what I'm, you know, imploring you to do is to support independent media that is responsive to its viewers rather than its advertisers and its owners. Because the Free Speech TV is a nonprofit. There is no giant corporation that owns it. And it does not take advertising dollars of any consequence. And as a result of that, there's no, oh, gee, we can't do that story because it'll offend the health insurance companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the oil companies. We can't do that story because it'll offend the big pharmaceutical makers. And you know that those stories are not being done on national television for those exact reasons. So please call now and support Free Speech TV. 877-378-8669. Give them a call. Thanks so much.
hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And we will, by the way, when Attorney General Sessions, Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III, or the second or the fourth, no, he's the third, isn't he? Yeah, he's the third. When he starts to testify, we will, we can get a feed off the Senate Intelligence Committee, and we will play that. So, no need to leave the show if you're curious, because it appears to be a lot of drama around this and what's going on with this. A few other things, kind of newsy things that I wanted to get into, but actually, let me pick up a couple of phone calls here first. Dave has been on hold for a while. Dave in Seattle. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I just want to say parenthetically that the fiduciary rule has got a lot to do with preserving the fake credit markets that are kind of the plumbing of the modern financial system.
What do you mean?
What I call, well, all the credit markets, CDS markets, credit derivatives markets are not real markets. Some of them are even internal to single banks. And if you are a fiduciary, you have to get the best price for your client's securities on a real market. Well, the problem is there's no way to avoid, unless they were radically reformed, there's no way to avoid all these, the CDS market, all the short-term financing markets.
Basically, the gray or the shadow banking system.
The entire shadow banking system is dependent on broker-dealer run. I'm sorry to use that term, but broker-dealer run fake markets. They're not real markets, which is why in the financial crisis they collapsed and disappeared. There was the auction rate securities, for example. It's a huge market, and it simply vanished because it was fake. It was 5 banks who every day got together and said, hey, let's all sell each other some paper.
Right, and then skim a little piece off the top, and everybody makes money, weirdly enough.
Right, and it was all, and the thing is, they were investing it on behalf of places like King County, Washington, and it was a fake market.
Right.
And they don't want that cracked open. I mean, that's the plumbing.
So what does this have to do with the fiduciary rule? Because I would assume that the fiduciary rule would not apply in non-bank markets, or does it?
No, that's the thing. If you know that the security, remember, a lot of these securities are the way that people who buy securities for consumers finance themselves. Right. The first thing you buy when you're a hedge fund or a large mutual fund is the first thing you do is you buy financing, and then you go and buy stocks.
Right.
Right. So the where you get the money to buy the stocks also would be subject to the fiduciary rule. And of course, that's how, let's say you want a job at Goldman Sachs, you run a big fund. Well, you're going to take financing from Goldman Sachs at a bad rate for your customers. And it's completely invisible to them because they say, oh, well, we're just borrowing money on the market.
Right.
But it's not a real market. And you know it's not a real market because you're trying to get a job with the company selling you the financing.
So once again, what does this have to do with the fiduciary rule?
Well, if you had the fiduciary rule, it would crack this wide open.
Oh, if it's universal, if it's universally applied, you mean?
If it's universally applied, because then everybody who sells securities to the public would be responsible for knowing that they got the best price on financing.
Right.
And they can't get the best. There's no such thing as a best price on financing because it's a fake market.
Right.
And then things like securitization. Well, they had these fake companies put together big piles of bad bonds, totally captive to the banks, and they want to do that again.
But they are doing that right now. I mean, they're doing it with subprime used car loans.
Right, absolutely. Right. So if you want to create you want to buy a security of used car loans, right? Well, one of the things that they did during the financial crisis is that they bought piles of loans where the loans weren't even there. The loans they'd say, okay, we want $100 million of loans, but there's only $90 million of loans in the bundle. And they'd say, we'll take the rest of the $10 million. We'll trust you for it. You'd never be able to do that. That's ridiculous. You'd never be able to do that if you were a fiduciary.
Right.
Because you say, well, look, you got to detail every security that I'm buying. You can't just,
right.
I'm just going to trust you for it.
Yeah,
and it's very, very threatening. Trust me. I mean, talk to people on Wall Street. They are panicked about this.
Oh, that's interesting.
It unearths the entire system, and it's what they call in the business the plumbing.
So this is why the Republicans, the representatives of the billionaires and the banksters are so foaming at the mouth to get rid of the fiduciary rule, is because it will reveal the criminal behavior that's happening on Wall Street.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, Dave, brilliant. Thank you so much for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back in just a minute. If the hearing is just about to start, so probably when we come back, I mean, there'll be a bunch of pomp and circumstance, but we'll get into it. And welcome back. Gwendolyn, watching Free Speech TV in Rialto, California. Hey, Gwendolyn, what's on your mind today?
Yes, hi, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Listen, I don't know if this is going to go into the subject matter that you're on now, but I was thinking about what's going on with Trump in terms of how the Republicans are using the excuse that he didn't know, he's just coming into the presidency, so he needs help in terms of knowing what to do. But does this rule still apply? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. And if so, and if that's still in effect, then would that set a precedent if they do let Trump off in terms of using the excuse that, he didn't know, and he has the highest office of the land? So do you know that's still pretty much what the law says, ignorance of the law is no excuse?
Yes, ignorance of the law is still no excuse for breaking the law, and at all levels, in all places, and basically, Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, was asserting an ignorance of the law. He was saying ignorance of the standards, of how the FBI and the Justice Department and the White House, which in the hierarchy, you got the White House at the top, you got the Justice Department below them as a cabinet position, and then the Justice Department administers the FBI. So what Ryan was saying was that Trump just doesn't understand that. Well, first of all, that's no excuse for doing something that may or may not be criminal, or just look bad or not work. Number one, that's no excuse. And number two, Trump is aware of this. He does know what the protocols and appropriate behaviors are with regard to that separation between the Justice Department, the FBI, and the White House, because during the political campaign, when Bill Clinton met Loretta Lynch, she was the Attorney General at the time, working for Barack Obama, when he met her plane on the tarmac in, as I recall, Phoenix, and went over and sat on her plane and talked to her for about a half hour, guess who went nuts about it, saying that it's entirely inappropriate that the president be talking to the Attorney General about an investigation that the FBI was doing into his wife. It was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the one who was running around screaming about this is inappropriate, the president shouldn't be having these conversations, blah-de-blah-de-blah. So he clearly understood this, And now you've got Republicans running around going, he just doesn't know Washington, D.C., he doesn't know the rules, he doesn't know. No, those are just lies. Paul Ryan is an accomplished liar.
Yes, I agree. So could that set a precedent, though, in terms of whether or not someone go into court with that and say, look, President Trump got away with it, and he was ignorant of the law, and he is in the highest office of the land. So why are you giving me a different standard?
Well, it may set it won't set a legal precedent, Gwendolyn, because but it could set a moral standard for the country, and that would be a bad thing. But impeachment is not a legal process. It's a political process. It happens in Congress. And so, you know, if the president commits a crime, typically rather than being arrested for that crime, he gets impeached for that crime. So if this is an impeachable offense, what he's done, then, you know, like Jerry Ford, you know, he let Richard Nixon get away with it. I think it was a terrible thing, but, you know, he did. George Herbert Walker Bush let Reagan get away with his crimes and his treason. Gwendolyn, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The hearings are just starting. The Republican chairman, Richard Burr, is starting his little sales pitch. So let's just go to the hearing and see what's going on here. This is the hearing at the United States Senate, the Intelligence Committee, Chairman Richard Burr.
I believe any committee that the committee does should be done in public. But I also recognize the gravity of the committee's current investigation and the need for the American people to be presented the facts so that they might make their own judgments. It is for that reason that this committee has now held its 10th open hearing of 2017, more than double that of the committee in recent years, and the 5th on the topic of Russian interference.
Sessions is sitting here with a look on his face like he's about to go to the gallows. It's really
and
interesting.
to set the record straight on a number of allegations reported in the press. For example, there are several issues that I'm hopeful we will address today. One, did you have any meetings with Russian officials or their proxies on behalf of the Trump campaign or during your time as Attorney General? Two, what was your involvement with candidate Trump's foreign policy team and what were their possible interactions with Russians? Three, why did you decide to recuse yourself from the government's Russia investigation? And fourth, what role, if any, did you play in the removal of then FBI Director Comey? I look forward to a candid and honest discussion as we continue to pursue the truth behind Russia's interference in the 2016 elections. The committee's experienced staff is interviewing the relevant parties, having spoken to more than 35 individuals to date, to include just yesterday an interview of former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson. We also continue to review some of the most sensitive intelligence in our country's possession. As I've said previously, we will establish the facts, separate from rampant speculation, and lay them out for the American people to make their own judgment. Only then will we as a nation be able to put this episode to rest and look to the future. I'm hopeful that members will focus their questions today on the Russia investigation and not squander the opportunity by taking political or partisan shots. The Vice Chairman and I continue to lead this investigation together on what is a highly charged political issue.
In other words, please, Democrats, don't talk about Donald Trump.
But we remain a unified team with a dedicated, focused, and professional staff working tirelessly on behalf of the American people to find the truth.
We are such noble people.
The committee has made much progress as the political winds blow forcefully around us. And I think all members would agree that despite a torrent of public debate on who and what committee might be best suited to lead on this issue, the Intelligence Committee has lived up to its obligation to move forward with purpose and above politics. Mr. Attorney General, it's good to have you back. I would now turn to the Vice Chairman for any remarks he might have.
So now we get the opening remarks.
Thank you,
from
Mr.
the
Chairman.
Democrat.
And I want to also thank the way that we're proceeding on this investigation. Mr. Attorney General, it's good to see you again. And we appreciate
my recollection.
your
Oh, yeah,
appearance
Mark Warner,
on the
Senator
heels
Mark
of
Warner.
Mr. Comey's revealing testimony last week.
Virginia, I think.
I do, though, want to take a moment at the outset and first express some concern with the process by which we are seeing you, the Attorney General, today. It's my understanding that you were originally scheduled to testify in front of the House and Senate Appropriations Committees today. I know those appearances have been canceled to come here instead. While we appreciate his testimony before our committee, I believe, and I believe I speak for many of my colleagues, that I believe he should also answer questions from members of those committees and the Judiciary Committee as well.
The Appropriations Committee, by the way,
Attorney
wanted to
General,
know why,
it's my hope that
why
you
this
will
administration
reschedule
wants
those
to cut
appearances
funding at the FBI.
as soon as possible. In addition, I want to say at the outset that while we consider your appearance today as just the beginning of our interaction with you and your department, Mr. Attorney General, we had always expected to talk to you as part of our investigation. We believed it would be actually later in the process. We're glad to accommodate your request to speak to us today, but we also expect to have your commitment to cooperate with all future requests and make yourself available as necessary to this committee for, as the chairman has indicated, this very important investigation. Now let's move to the subject of today's discussion. Let's start with the campaign. You were an early and ardent supporter of Mr. Trump. In March, you were named as chairman of the Trump campaign's National Security Advisory Committee. You were much more than a surrogate. You were a strategic advisor who helped shape much of the campaign's national security strategy. No doubt, you will have key insights about some of the key Trump associates that we're seeking to hear from in the weeks ahead. Questions have also been raised about some of your own interactions with Russian officials during the campaign. During your confirmation hearing in January, you said, quote, you did not have communications with Russians. Senator Leahy later asked you in writing whether you've been in contact with anyone connected to any part of the Russian government about the 2016 election. You answered, I believe, with a definitive no. Despite that, the fact is, as we discovered later, that you did have interactions with Russian government officials during the course of the campaign. In March, you acknowledged 2 meetings with the Russian ambassador. Yet, there's also been some public reports of a possible 3rd meeting at the Mayflower Hotel on April 27th. I hope that today you will help clear up those discrepancies. We also expect, and hope this is very important, that you'll be willing to provide the committee with any documents that we'd need to shed light on this issue, such as emails or calendars. Then, there's the topic of the firing of former FBI Director Comey. Last Thursday, we received testimony from Mr. Comey. Under oath, he outlined his very troubling interactions with the president, as well as the circumstances of his firing.
This is Mark Warner,
a few disturbing points
Vice Chair of the Intelligence Committee.
First, Mr. Comey, who has decades of experience at the Department of Justice and at the FBI, serving under presidents of both parties, was so unnerved by the actions of the president that he felt, quote, compelled to fully document every interaction they had. Mr. Comey sat where you are sitting today and testified that he was concerned that the President of the United States might lie about the nature of their meetings. That's a shocking statement from one of our nation's top law enforcement officials. We also heard that Director Comey took it as a direction from the President that he was to drop the FBI's investigation into former National Security Advisor, General Mike Flynn. Finally, we heard from Mr. Comey that he believes he was fired over his handling of the Russia investigation. The President himself confirmed this in statements to the media. This is deeply troubling for all of us who believe on both sides of the aisle in preserving the independence of the FBI. We have a lot of work in order to follow up on these alarming disclosures. Mr. Attorney General, your testimony today is an opportunity to begin the process of asking those questions. For instance, again, I know others will ask about this, you recused yourself from the Russia investigation, yet you participated in the firing of Mr. Comey over the handling of that same investigation. We'll want to ask you about how you view your recusal and whether you believe you've complied with it fully. In addition, we heard from Mr. Comey last week that the President asked you to leave the Oval Office so that he could speak one-on-one with Mr. Comey. Again, a very concerning action. We will need to hear from you about how you viewed the President's request and whether you thought it was appropriate. We'll also want to know if you are aware of any attempts by the President to enlist leaders in the intelligence community to undermine this very same Russia investigation.
Whoa.
Most importantly, our committee will want to hear what you are doing to ensure that the Russians or any other foreign adversaries cannot attack our democratic process like this ever again. I'm concerned that the President still does not recognize the severity of the threat. He, to date, I believe, has not even acknowledged the unanimous conclusions of the U.S. intelligence community that Russia massively intervened in our elections. The threat we face is real, and it's not limited to us. The recent events in France are, again, a stark reminder that all Western democracies must take steps to protect themselves. I believe the United States can and must be a leader in this effort, but it will require our administration to get serious about this matter. Finally, in the past several weeks, we've seen a concerning pattern of administration officials refusing to answer public, unclassified questions about allegations about the President in this investigation. We had a hearing with this subject last week. I want to commend the chairman, who at the end of that hearing made very clear that our witnesses, it was not acceptable for our witnesses to come before Congress without answers. The American people deserve to know what's going on here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to the witnesses' testimony.
So at this point, then, Jeff Sessions stands up and is sworn in, and he's going to start his statement, but it will be another minute or so. We've got a slightly time-delayed feed coming out of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and we have 90 seconds left in the show. So I don't know. It's Chris is
Chairman Burr and Ranking Member Warner for allowing me to publicly appear before your committee today. I appreciate the committee's critically important efforts to investigate Russian interference with our democratic processes. Such interference can never be tolerated, and I encourage every effort to get to the bottom of any such allegations. As you know, the Deputy Attorney General has appointed a special counsel to investigate the matters related to the Russian interference in the 2016 election. I'm here today to address several issues that have been specifically raised before this committee. And I appreciate the opportunity to respond to questions as fully as the Lord enables me to do so. But as I advise you, Mr. Chairman, and consistent with longstanding Department of Justice practice, I cannot and will not violate my duty to protect the confidential communications I have with the President. Now let me address some issues.
That's an assertion of executive authority.
I did not have any private meetings, do I recall any conversations with any Russian officials at the Mayflower Hotel. I did not attend any meetings at that event separate. Prior to the speech attended by the President today, I attended a reception with my staff that included at least 24 people and President Trump, though I do recall several conversations that I had during that pre-speech reception.
So we'll fill you in tomorrow on everything else that goes forward from this if you're not picking it up from other media. And we'll continue the conversation on all these things that are going on. Stick around. See you tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It really does require all of us. That includes you. So please pitch in, help out. Tag You're It. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.